Welcome to the Mid-Week Tease with me, Adelle Onyango, where I share some random and not too random thoughts on things. And in this episode, let's dive into this community thing. So recently, a friend who I hadn't seen in a while because we just have very conflicting schedules and he travels a lot, he sent me a message saying he needs to see me about something before it becomes urgent. Now, I live an hour away from Nairobi, which is the capital of Kenya, and I come into Nairobi twice a week. That's for weekdays, and then once, if at all, on weekends. So the day he sent me this message, I wasn't meant to be coming to Nairobi at all, but almost like instinctively and automatically, I was like, yeah, I'm going to drive into Nairobi for this, you know? And on the very long drive, and I even told him in person when I got to him, it hit me that he is part of the circle who I would drop anything for. And it just occurred to me on that drive, like, yeah, definitely this guy is one of those people for me. And I'm so glad that I told him this as well when we eventually met up that day, because he really appreciated it, right? There was a time I thought I didn't have community. With the end of my marriage, a lot of relationships around me either ended as well or had to change for many reasons. One being that I was shedding off my survival mask and my people pleasing was also dying. And really, I was becoming my true self. So I was going to be completely different from who I was in those relationships. Some of them had the ability to expand and accommodate this new me. Some of them didn't. And while this change was happening in that moment, and until very recently, honestly, I felt very less than when it came to friendships and community, right? I kept wondering if I have a support system, do I have a community? And it turns out I do. I remember having a very weird dream a few months ago. I was working late and running late for a family dinner in this dream, right? And it felt like I was at some sort of shoot, but I just know I was at a very demanding visual work engagement. And I could feel that I enjoyed doing this work, but I was also very tired. So I left the shoot and there were two people with me who I couldn't really see. I could just tell that there are two people on either side of me escorting me to this family dinner that I was super, super, super late for. When I got to the restaurant, it was closed. And I called someone who was at the dinner and they said, because I was so late, they moved to another restaurant. So me and these two people whose faces I couldn't really see started heading to the second restaurant. And it felt like these two people with me were the ones who were like coordinating logistics, because I distinctly remember them figuring out the ride to the second restaurant, right? When we get to the second restaurant, the people I expected to see at the family dinner weren't there. And instead, it was this restaurant that had many different tables, obviously, like many restaurants. And at two tables in the corner, because it was pretty late, so many tables were empty. But at two tables at the corner, on one was my best friend, and on another table was another friend who has dreadlocks, who I'm saying that because he comes up a little later so that I want you to know who I'm talking about. And at the time, I didn't think we were super close. So I remember just kind of like wondering. Yeah, so my best friend on one table, this friend with dreadlocks, and a few other people at another table, right? And I think the dream ended there. And I woke up just like, what the fuck was that? You know? A month or so after I had this dream, I legit almost died. I'm not being dramatic. It was a very traumatic experience. I choked while having lunch, and I think I was going. I'm very sure I was on my way out, right? Luckily, I was having lunch where this friend with dreadlocks works, and the person who was right next to me didn't immediately recognize that I was choking. And when you're choking, this was my first time choking ever. When you're choking, you can't speak. Like there's no sound, right? And so I was having a hard time explaining what's happening. And I was trying to show her the Heimlich maneuver, like, just help me like this. And the only sound that was coming out was me gasping for air. And this friend with dreadlocks and another one of his colleagues heard me. They came around the corner to check, like, what is that sound from? And the friend with dreadlocks saw me, immediately rushed to me, performed the Heimlich maneuver, and just kept on like reassuring me and like just helped me get back until I started coughing. And now it was clear that my airway was, free. And to this day, he says he only remembers turning the corner and seeing me choking. And then when I started coughing, he's like, everything else he was, it's like he can't remember. Imagine that. He literally saved my life. Like, not being dramatic, he actually saved my life. The friend with dreadlocks who I had dreamt about like a month before, and I haven't even told him about this dream. Anyway, I really love my dreams. Back to this episode. I just really wanted to talk about community, because sometimes you may have community all around you, you just don't recognize them, right? And so I found a couple of tips to help you build up your community and build up your support system. And the first thing you have to do is perhaps sustain current relationships. Do an audit of the relationships around you currently, and then start sustaining the ones you want to build up, right? And once you've zeroed in on the ones that you're like, yeah, I want to pour into these ones. Because remember, when it comes to community and support systems and friendships, it's a two-way street, right? So once you've figured out the ones that you want to stay, number one, show your appreciation for them. I think sometimes we take for granted the people closest to us. So tell them how important they are to you and thank them for the things that they do or that they teach you. And I've really found that I've started doing this a lot. Now it's almost very natural. For example, a few days ago, I was kind of like irritated with a friend of mine because of this, that, or the other, but I really was being a bit selfish. And I was telling my partner like, this has happened, blah, blah, blah. And he really was like appreciating my emotions and my irritability, but was also trying to help me see both sides of the coin. And in the moment I was irritated with him. I was just like, whatever. But after sitting with it for a couple of days, I could recognize that I was being a bit selfish in the moment, and maybe I could have communicated better to the friend who I had felt a bit irritated by. And so I called my partner and I was like, hey, thank you so much for planting that seed of, hey, there's another perspective here. It was very natural. I remember thinking about it and I was like, oh, I like that I'm exercising this muscle of showing appreciation for the people closest to me. I think we often take them for granted. The next thing you want to do is stay in touch, like, through phone calls, text, emails, when you have the capacity to reciprocate invitations, like actually pour in. This is something I'm really trying to do, especially with my friends who don't live in the country. So my high school best friend who is from Botswana but lives between the states, Zambia and South Africa, she has been to Kenya twice in like the last 2 quarters. We reconnected the first trip and we just felt like nothing had changed. And so the second trip, we reconnected again. And I actually vocalized like, hey, I want to take this friendship seriously. So I'm going to try very hard to pour into it. It's difficult with capitalism and adulting. But yeah, just do your best in trying to stay in touch. The other thing is to be available when you're needed. I'm so happy when this friend of mine reached out to me, I immediately was like, hey, I'm coming now. I feel like that being available when you're needed really communicates like, hey, I'm taking this relationship seriously. Like, I care about you. You are important to me. Don't forget, you have a value as a friend to be able to come through when times are tough for your friends, for the people who are part of your support system, you can be part of their support system as well. The other thing is support successes. I feel like, and I've heard this from many years ago, somebody who I considered a friend and was in the same industry as me told me it's hard for them to be my friend because they feel like the things they want to be happening in their career are happening in my career. And so there's a bit of envy or jealousy that comes up. And I kind of I was like, oh, I'm not sure. I was a bit conflicted when she first told me that. I remember telling my best friend at the time that, and I still remember my best friend at the time saying, yeah, I can understand what she's feeling. And that was like a moment where I was just like, is this best friend, is this like a strong relationship here? Because I just was wondering like, oh, are you feeling this as well? Conflicted because I was like, I don't want to have to feel like I have to reduce who I am in spaces that should be safe for me, you know? But I think jealousy and envy is normal. Honestly, like I'm not going to sit here and say I've never felt it, but it's more for strangers. Like I've never felt jealous of someone I call a friend or, you know, close proximity to me. It's maybe like someone I aspire to be like in my industry or skill set wise, etc. I've understood that jealousy and envy is a normal human feeling. It's identifying where is it coming from and dealing with that. I think what happens sometimes is you want to punish the person you're jealous of because you're jealous of them. You know what I mean? And what should really happen is when you feel the emotion is acknowledge it, yes, but introspect, like where could it be coming from? So back to my point, I think it's important to like support successes of those people in your support systems, like genuinely be excited for them. I love writing people cards or buying them. I love buying people gifts to celebrate things, you know. And I have a friend who, even when I have a career moment, she's always like, oh, when are we linking up? We have to do dinner to celebrate this, you know. And sometimes it could be the smallest thing, like, oh my God, I bagged this client who's probably like just bought one advert, you know, on our platform, or I've done 5 wellness talks, and she's just like, let's do dinner, let's celebrate that. And it feels good. So I think you should do that as well. Another thing is just like accept your support system's help. This is a difficult one. I know I have struggled for a long time in being able to ask for help and then being able to accept help. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. I think quite a few people find the accepting and asking for help very difficult. Like I remember constantly saying, like, I don't want to be a burden to anyone, you know. However, the people who love you care about how you feel and want to help you. They truly want to help you. And it's motivated by them loving and caring for you, you know. It's not motivated by them feeling like you're a burden and like, oh, here we go again. You know what I mean? Like you kind of have to trust in the love that those who love you have for you. And if you do a good job in like putting the right people around you, it'll be easier for you to trust in their love. Try and accept help from your support system. They care about you. You've done such a wonderful job in making sure the right people are around you. Let them help you, you know, accept that help, ask for the help. The last tip is one that I have just started understanding is respecting your community and your support system and your friends' needs and limits. You know, everyone has like their own thresholds for social interaction, or even just like how much help can they give. And not only is this threshold specific to everyone, but it changes because people's lives are not dormant, right? So you could have a friend who can go 3 months constantly talking to you every week or every day, and then something happens and they can't do that, you know? I feel like there is some grace to give people in respecting their needs and their limits. What are they able to give at this time to me. I also feel like, for example, maybe they are more of an introvert, you're more of an extrovert. So even like the activities you'll do together, you kind of have to respect that person's needs and their limits, right? And their boundaries. I am learning that it's an act of love for you to do that, you know, and not to come into it with a selfish chip on your shoulder, like, oh, I wanted to do this, but we can't because you know what I mean? Like, just kind of like respecting the people you love's needs and limits. That is an act or a service of love for you to do. So those are tips for existing friendships that you, after you do your audit, you're like, I think this friendship can work. But what if you want to build a community from scratch, you know, people who you don't know? So something that's great is to volunteer for a cause. The reason I find this to be a very great tip is because you're probably going to volunteer for a cause that's aligned with a set of values you have or beliefs, right? So chances are the other volunteers share these values and beliefs with you. And so it's going to bring you into contact with these people who have shared ideals and values, and then becomes easier for you to build a friendship and then build a support system from there. The other thing is to take up, this one is said a lot, to take up a hobby, or so if it's like joining a gym, a sport, or something where you're increasing a skill. Group activities, you know, again, it's an opportunity to build new friendships while doing something that you like. It's something that's great for, let's say if it's a gym, something that's great for your body, great for your mind, and then you're meeting new people. This one, I'm really, as I'm sharing it with you, I'm failing at this one, to be honest. I just need to work on reducing my anxiety when it comes to trying out new group activities, you know. I've done a bit of like improvement. I've gone for theatrical shows alone, etc. But that's not the same as signing up for like a yoga class where you don't know anyone. And there's a yoga class in like at the golf club near where I stay. And I've been saying I'll join it. But even I drove to the golf club and I was like inquiring costs, dates, blah, blah, blah. But it's just like anxiety, you know? So I don't know, maybe you and I, as you listen to this, can like vow to each other that we're actually going to join a group activity. You know, we're not going to let anxiety win. Yeah, let me know in the comments. The third thing is man your neighbors and coworkers. Put yourself out there and meet them. Honestly, I've made friends with one neighbor and his family. They live across the forest. So they're on the other side. So I may not be able to see them as often. But honestly, they have been so helpful in advice, inviting me for things. I've hosted them at my house. Yeah, and it's just been an opportunity to have a new support system. And I feel like as we grow that particular friendship, they will be the people I lean on in this area for like, hey, this is happening, or hey, do you have a gardener? I think we have the same mechanic, if I'm not wrong, in this area. So actually, I have overplanted cabbage in my kitchen garden, so I'm definitely going to take them some when we harvest. So yeah, this is an opportunity for you to build acquaintances who you can see on a regular basis. The other one could be really good for all my corporate baddies, all my entrepreneurs, is joining professional organizations. This is really a really good tip because sometimes having friends in the same professional field as you is so beneficial because they just understand things that other people wouldn't, you know? So for example, for me being in the media space, things like how haphazard your schedule can be, how draining some things can be, some of the not so nice things you experience, like cyberbullying on steroids, etc. Sometimes it's very hard for someone outside of the industry to understand it. And it helps to have a friend in the industry. They get it. I have one friend in the industry. We meet up fairly regularly, and it's quite refreshing to have those conversations in that space. I feel like I can be a different kind of vulnerable with them because they get it, you know? Lastly, I think it's also important to make your personal space a support system in itself for you. So it could be like build your own personal support structure. Like, how do you unwind after a hard day? I recently started taking more bubble baths. Like, I will literally light candles all around my bathtub, put on either some music or my favorite show in my bathroom, and then just like sink into a nice warm bath after either a hard day or before a hard day or just for the sake of it, just to be like, hey, babe, let me treat you. You know what I mean? And so think about how do you calm yourself down when you're feeling sad or you're feeling down, And this also includes like your inner voice. How can it be more of a support system and less of a bully? Figuring out how to support yourself, prioritizing your self-care, very, very important. And so it looks very different for different people, like me and my baths, me talking to my therapist, that's what it looks like for me. But I think it's important to spend time figuring out how your immediate space that just has you alone inhabiting it can be a safe space, a support system, and the start of a healthy community for you. Thanks for listening to the Mid-Week Tease, a Legally Clueless Africa production. Episodes go out every Wednesday, and you can learn more about us by going to legallycluelessafrica.com.